All right, can everyone hear me? All right, okay. When I was younger, I asked my mom why she moved to the United States. She said that there was better opportunity here and that she wanted a better life for her children. So you can imagine the immense amount of pressure I felt from such a young age. After all, my mom didn't move to the United States for nothing, right? Now, raise your hand if you have ever associated the idea of success with wealth. All right, now raise your other hand if you have ever heard of the American dream. There's a strong connection between these two concepts. We tend to see those who are successful as those who are rich and powerful. And the concept of the American dream encourages people to never stop working hard. If you never stop working hard, regardless of where you are in life, apparently you're going to reach your goals. But is it ever really that simple? Personally, for most of my life, I was given a very straightforward definition of success. The expectation for me was to finish high school, go to college, get my degree, find a good paying job, and start a family. I was convinced that as long as I worked hard, I would lead a life that was fulfilling, successful, and rich. As a teenager, I soon realized that those traditional values did not line up with my experiences. Now, in high school, I never fully felt like I fit in. I felt like I was always trying to be someone that I wasn't. I was putting all of this pressure on myself to be like everyone else. I would always compare myself to other people in my school. Now, for someone who was a minority, still learning to be comfortable with her identity, this was something that was especially harmful to my well-being. And the stress didn't stop at school. When I went home, it felt like absolute chaos. And so the next day, when I had to go to school, I felt so emotionally drained. And then after the school day ended, I had extracurricular activities to go to. After those extracurriculars, I had to mentally prepare myself to go back home. It was a never-ending cycle, and I felt like I never had a break from my responsibilities. At this point, my mental health was at an all-time low. But what else was I supposed to do? I didn't feel like I could talk to my family about it. In my culture, some things were never addressed, and they were never said out loud. Growing up in an immigrant household, there was no such thing as mental health issues. You weren't depressed, you were just dramatic. You weren't anxious, you were just on your phone too much. Oh, and don't ever expect the words "I'm sorry" to come out of anyone's mouth after a fight. The closest thing I ever got to an apology was, "Here, I cut you up this bowl of fruit." And all of a sudden, it was all water under the bridge. I couldn't talk to my family about my mental health without it being awkward. To be fair, I did have a very different experience growing up as a teenager in comparison to my mom. It was a different place, it was a different time, and it was a completely different environment. Oftentimes, I'd feel really guilty. The point was always made to me that there was food on the table, there was a roof over my head, and there were clothes on my back. But there was still something missing. Even though I was getting my physical needs met, I realized that my emotional needs were not being met in the ways that I wanted to. I didn't feel like I had my own safe space, a place to fully decompress. Now, don't get me wrong, I was still able to find some outlets, especially within my extracurriculars. Performing arts was an area I could express myself creatively. It was also an area of my life where there was a lot of consistency. Additionally, my school club was a platform where I could advocate and use my voice to empower those who had mental health issues and even just spread mental health awareness. It was also an area of my life where I could talk to so many new people and meet and work with so many different types of people. It was a place, or when I went home, I felt like I was back to square one. I didn't feel like I had the freedom in that environment that I was living in to truly take care of myself. I made a plan. Once I turned 18, I was going to move out and I was going to be fully independent. And through that independence, I knew that I was going to thrive. But once I became an adult, I realized that the plans I had were not as straightforward as I once thought. While I knew change was coming, I didn't realize it was going to be so uncomfortable. At the time, I had just recently graduated high school and started college. And in the span of a few months, bad luck hit. I became homeless. I totaled my car in an accident. I went through major relationship losses. I lost access to therapy. I struggled financially. The list goes on and on. Seriously, it's like the writers of my TV show were bored. It's like they were losing views. Everything was so different. My best friend had just moved all the way across the state for college. She was one of my biggest support systems. And so I continued to work hard, but it felt really overwhelming. I was working so hard to the point of burnout. I was neglecting taking care of myself. I caught myself stuck in this cycle of feeling alone and being afraid to ask for help, and then further isolating myself. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of it. My biggest fear had happened. I had failed at adulting. But how could this be? I thought I did everything right. I thought that if I stuck to my plan, then everything would be okay. Yet everything was falling apart. I had wanted to be independent for so long, and it didn't turn out anywhere near close of how I wanted it to turn out. Ultimately, I had no choice but to accept that some things were simply out of reach. Rather than focusing on what I couldn't control, I started to focus on what I could. I made a list of things that I wanted to accomplish. Now, this used to stress me out in ways that you could not imagine. If I didn't get everything done in the time that I wanted to, I would become extremely disappointed and extremely frustrated with myself. But back in high school, my Spanish teacher told me something that has always stuck in the back of my mind. Mi amor, you are not superhuman. While I hated hearing this at the time, I knew that she was right. So even if I didn't cross everything off of my list, I knew that at the end of the day, I was ultimately still making progress. I had to take things step by step, one day at a time. Heck, sometimes I had to take things 1 hour at a time, and sometimes even 1 minute at a time. As much as I didn't want to, I knew I had to take some things off my plate. This meant doing things like adjusting my class schedule, learning to say no, making time for therapy, and doing self-care activities. For once in my life, life was not all work. We live in a society that is so focused on work that sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. Learning to prioritize yourself is something that is so much easier said than done. There are times where I still feel very guilty for setting boundaries or for saying no, but I've learned the hard way that you can only do so much as a person, as one person. You can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. You have to learn to put your own oxygen mask on first. Though I have learned the importance of prioritizing myself, there are days where it feels harder than others. Today, I am a full-time college student working 2 jobs. While there's still a lot on my plate, I have learned how to make it feel much more manageable. Back in high school, through the midst of all the chaos, there were a few things that made my life feel more stable and made me feel more hopeful for the future. I took those and I implemented them in my adult life today. I incorporate consistency by scheduling a school and work routine that works for me and is the most efficient. I incorporate my passion by taking classes in my field that really interest me. I incorporate my people skills by working with a variety of people in my job as a behavior technician. I put myself in a situation where I can use my personal traits to my benefit rather than see them as an obstacle. I change the way I view myself and also the world around me. Success does not have just one definition. The definition of success I grew up with is not wrong, but I learned that it is not the right definition for me. To me, success is continuous growth and learning. And through my experiences, I have learned that it's okay to take a break. Sometimes you have to step back, reassess your priorities, and figure out what the heck you want. And the only way to fully achieve balance is to change your experiences and your goals altogether. Thank you.